Welcome back to College Football Addiction. We've got the Rose Bowl coming up tomorrow. We've got Zach Smith, Menace 2 Sports. Our video presented by BetUS. We'll give them some love later. But Zach, we just talked about this off air. I don't know too many people that would have predicted Ohio State's first-round matchup to go down like it did. Maybe the last people that would have predicted it to go down the way it did would have been Ohio State fans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, coming off that Michigan loss, everyone's in the dumps. Shit, they were selling their tickets to Tennessee fans. That's how badly they did not want to watch Ohio State because they just had that bad taste in their mouth. And it was one of those things, and we talked about it. They are impossible to predict because the majority of their issues come with their mentality calling offensive plays. Like the first Oregon matchup, no one could have ever predicted that Dylan Gabriel will throw for 341 yards and the secondary would get cooked because their secondary is viewed as an NFL secondary. Yeah. And so you watch that offense that played against Michigan and you're like, this defense is really good. Yeah. Who would have known that they just launch it to Jeremiah Smith a bunch of times like they should do every game?
The game plan's kind of simple. Okay, and I don't think this is a hot take. If Ohio State plays to that level, now there are other good teams left in this thing. If they play to that level 3 more times, they will win the national championship.
Oh,
I don't mean to look ahead, but that's I don't even think that's a hot take.
Yeah. No, it's not. I mean, if they call the game like that and are able to hit those deep shots and that defense, I mean, they shut everything Tennessee was trying to do down. If they play like that, they absolutely are winning the national championship.
Yeah. They may have, and there will be tough tests later, whether they win, if they win this. But this is one of the toughest tests. The rematch from earlier in the year. Going back to that matchup, where do you think Ohio State has improved the most? And where do you maybe have the most cause for concern around this Ohio State team since that October matchup?
Well, I think the reality is that the secondary's never gotten beaten like they got beaten in that game. And it was a couple double moves, a couple misplayed balls in the air, and it was just a disaster. And it's the only time it's happened. So you would think the secondary's improved. They've learned from that. They're not going to bite on double moves. They're going to play with vision better. And you would think there'd be a slight improvement there. And I think they lost their best 2 offensive linemen. So clearly up front on the offensive side of the ball, Ohio State is not as good as they were, but they're blocking better. They've kind of figured out their run game identity better than when they went in week 6 against Oregon. So I think that's definitely a deficiency comparing the 2 games is that they lost a first round tackle and the Remington Award winning center. Like that's 2 really big pieces. But the other side of it is what's different about Oregon, right? Well, Jordan Burch is going to play. He didn't play the first time they played. Trayshawn Holden, we assume, is not going to spit in anyone's face and get ejected, so he'll be playing. And so Oregon's going to have a couple pieces that they didn't have the first round game. And I really looked at that game, and rarely do we get this, right? Where they already played once. Let's really dive into that game to figure out what this game could look like. Ohio State was terrible on third down, 4 of 12. And other than that, they were able to throw the ball. Will Howard has certainly developed a deep ball since then, which is a huge difference. We saw it against Tennessee, like launching it deep to Jeremiah Smith. Who would have thought? I think the dumbest person in the room knew that would probably be a good idea, and they've started doing it. And so if they're able to do that, I mean, this is a different offensive team than it was against Oregon, and they lost by 1 point. I mean, on a last drive that just ran out of time, they were moving the ball in Autzen Stadium. So neutral site. I think this is. I mean, to me, I said on my show today, this is the national championship. And I know something crazy could happen. Someone could upset, but this reminds me of 2022 Georgia, Ohio State. This reminds me of 2014 Bama, Ohio State. Where yeah, I know you're going to have to play Oregon in 2014, but if you beat Bama, you won it all, unless you just royally screw it up. That's how I feel about this game. Whoever comes out of this game will be the odds-on favorite to win the national championship, overtaking Texas. And I think like you said, if they play like they played against Tennessee, nobody can beat them.
Yeah, the only reason that these 2 teams aren't the favorites to win it all is because they have to play each other. And
Absolutely.
So Vegas doesn't, when they're making odds right now in a vacuum, these 2 teams would be the favorites if they weren't playing each other in this round. Obviously, someone's odds go down to 0 after Wednesday afternoon. But yeah, the winner of this game is going to be, and the winner of this game has the best win in the playoffs. I don't think that's close, right? You kind of eliminate the next best team or the next most talented team, and Texas is talented. That's not a massive shot their way, and we'll see what Georgia does with the backup. But maybe this is a dumb question, but I'll get right back to chatting with Zach, but first I do want to tell you about BetUS. If you're betting on this game, make sure you're using our code over at BetUS. YouTube 150. That's YouTube 150 gives you a 150% sign up bonus on your first deposit, but they're not done with just that. You get 125% on your next 2 deposits, all of that up to $2,000. BetUS has upped the game for you this year. Make sure that you're using them through all of the bowls, all the playoffs, NFL playoffs, March Madness, everything that you want to bet on, they have you taken care of. Appreciate BetUS for their support. I guess one that has to be asked, I mean, there's no question about the way that Ryan Day calls this game going forward, right? Like, there's no way it reverts away from it, right? I mean, and maybe Ohio State fans are still scarred, so it has to be asked. But, like, comparing the last 2 games, this has to be the way you attack going forward, right?
It has to be. And to be fair, this has always been the same issue for Ryan Day. Even in 2022, they go lose to Michigan, and you're just scratching your head like, what was that? Then they go play a ridiculous Georgia team, and it's a completely different mentality, game plan, play calling, everything. And they go down to the wire, miss a last-second field goal in what was essentially the national championship game. So he's always kind of done this. Like, it's a Michigan problem. It's not really a Ryan Day, like, play calling or game planning problem. It's just when he goes against Michigan, I think losing that first year, CJ Stroud's rookie year at Ohio State, just gave him PTSD. And now he just can't do what he needs to do against that team. So I think that I am fairly confident that you're going to see that same attack mentality in this matchup.
When you look at this and you think about the fact that Oregon hasn't played in a month, or almost a month by the time we get to it, and Ohio State did play more recently, but then also got to take, it's the same number of games because they got to, obviously they weren't playing the conference championship week. How much does the rest versus rust factor come in? And then the fact that Ohio State's playing this with more confidence than anyone else in the playoff right now because of the way they played last week.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And I think what that first round game does, it's hard to bowl prep for any bowl game. Because, especially you start talking about those when it was back in the BCS days where that added another week and you had 5-6 weeks off. It's really hard to keep your basic core fundamentals sharp when you just don't play games for a whole month. That ball security, tackling, like the little things that you harp on and work on every single day because you have to. When you get a bowl prep, it's like, all right, you feel like you have forever. And those things can, like you said, it can get rusty. Like you can start to get a little sloppy tackling. The ball could start to dip as you're running it and you don't have as good a ball security. The timing with the receivers, that needs to be worked constantly through bowl prep. I believe Dan Lanning is one of the best coaches in the country, so I'm sure he had a great plan. And I'm sure it's been executed, so I'm sure they'll be fine. But it is a concern because not only did Ohio State play a game, so they had all that game prep and a game to play in to keep them sharp, but they also, like you said, they hit that game with such crazy performance that they have an insane momentum right now. Like everyone in that building believes they're absolutely winning the national championship.
Yeah. The heat or the intensity from the fan base that was literally just selling their tickets 10 days ago to Tennessee fans, obviously they need to win more. And if they were to lose to Oregon, maybe that gets ratcheted back up. Obviously the way they perform will matter. But how much did that Tennessee performance cool things? Is it still kind of wait and see mode? What is the mood around there?
I mean, it's you get a faction of the fan base that is like so happy and excited and, oh my, we might win it all. But I think the majority of people left that Tennessee game just saying, what the hell? Like, really? Like, it's almost like proved more incompetence. Like this, you were capable of this and we didn't get that against Michigan. And so it honestly pissed some people off, made them even more mad, but it's fans. I mean, they're going to get mad. They're outlandish most of the time. I think winning in that fashion, and if he's able to beat Oregon, I think everything within the athletic department, he's good in the hood. Like he has no problems right now.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is the fans are lunatics, right? And it was funny to watch. I talked with Allie about this the other day. It was funny to watch Saban even call it out, like, oh, well, these fans need to go see psychology. And I'm just like, well, buddy, your fans have done some pretty crazy things. Like we've got people shooting people over the Iron Bowl. We got people poisoning. Fans are crazy. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, are Ohio State fans unreasonable? Absolutely. Is everyone else's fans unreasonable? Yeah. Like I've seen fans of stupid,
he also never lost to Auburn 4 times in a row. You imagine what those rednecks would have been like if he lost 4 in a row to Auburn?
Right. Let's have a little nuance with
Right.
our criticism. But, he now works with a four-letter network, and there is no nuance with the way that we talk about sports there. So,
No.
but that was going to be my next question is, Ryan Day is in no jeopardy of. I mean, if they lost by 40 tomorrow, maybe some talks happen. But like, there's really inside the building there, or with the boosters that matter, right? The people that really dictate this stuff. Your vibe is that it is very much different than where the fan base sits.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think the one thing that is true, Ryan Day was going to be safe, assuming now if they got blown out by Tennessee, might have a different conversation. But with a win over Tennessee, even if it was a close game, Ryan Day was going to be safe. But there are some assistant coaches who were coaching for their job. I mean, the offensive line has been the scapegoat of this team for really 2 years, and they've missed on some recruits. And Justin Fry, who's a good friend of mine, who's the O-line coach, I mean, his seat was really hot. But now you're looking at what they did against Tennessee, who has a great defensive front, and the way the offensive line was able to perform down their two best linemen. I mean, all of a sudden, everyone is like, "Oh, I was wrong. I'm sorry, Justin. You're doing a great job." So you have guys that could be saving their jobs, just not the head coach. He was not in jeopardy. I think had they lost to Tennessee, it would be a conversation, and they probably still wouldn't fire him, but his seat would be really hot. Now it's cooling off.
The way that the offensive line, the way that they had all the discombobulation, and a lot of that due to injury and stuff, right? But the way that they looked against Michigan versus the way they looked against Tennessee with that good front, we were talking before the game how that's one of the best fronts in college football, not just the SEC, not just the playoff, like one of the best around. The way they dominated that is really, I don't know, as good as Jeremiah is and as good as like all these other players, like the way that offensive line kind of came together against that front is probably what gives me the most. It's why I'm leaning Ohio State in this. It's why I think they could go out and win the national title. If they can get that kind of performance, if they can give Will that time, he has shown that with time and those weapons, he can be really elite. And so if they can continue that performance, they're going to be just fine. How well do you think they do this week against an Oregon front that's also really good?
Yeah, I mean, I have Oregon and Tennessee, and probably lump Ohio State in there as probably top 5 defensive fronts, let's call it. And I think the way they were able to game plan, it's the biggest thing that I saw is the way they game planned. Like every offensive line's different, every offensive lineman is different, and if you try to fit a square peg in a round hole, it's idiotic. And this offensive line has been really good at gap schemes, counters, things like that. They're not great zone blockers. They're just not. And that was force fed in the Michigan game to run stretch, run zone. And it's like, why are we doing this? One, Michigan has 2 great D tackles, and 2, that's not your strength on the offensive line. And it's like they realized that, or that was the final nail in the coffin. And they're like, all right, we can't do that. That's stupid. And they started running these different styles of run plays that this offensive line is actually pretty good at. It's like, and now they definitely had a different mentality about them. I think they definitely heard the noise, and it was beaten into them. Ryan Day spent every practice he was spending with the offensive line. I think they had a real culture level up and just kind of mentality level up on the offensive line. You'd see it there was a goal line play against Tennessee, and their young tight end, Jelani Thurman, just blew up this defensive end. They knocked a double team back, scored a touchdown. The whole O-line's like pumping up the crowd, flexing. It's just like a different energy around the group that I think just shows the momentum that they have right now in that room specifically.
Is there one thing about this game that gives you what that Oregon does well, and maybe it's their wide receivers or Gabriel being able to go off, but what about Oregon maybe gives you the most pause from an Ohio State perspective? Although, they're the 13-0 Big Ten champions, number 1 overall.
Right.
Like, I'm sure there's more than one thing, but what's the biggest thing that kind of has you like, man, if Oregon does this really well, we might be in for a long night?
Well, it's the only game all year this year that Ohio State didn't play great defense because of the weapons, because of Jordan James in the backfield. He went off for 115 yards. They didn't even have Trayshawn Holden, still threw for 341. Like, they put up almost 500 yards on Jim Knowles' defense, and they lost the game 32-31. And it's inexcusable with the talent they have on defense to allow over 30 points to anybody, in my opinion. And I just think Oregon was – Dan Lanning's a really good football coach. They came out with a great game plan, and they attacked the shit out of Ohio State's defense. And that's something we haven't seen. We've seen some offensive struggles, couldn't run the ball. Will Howard threw a couple picks. It's the one game, and it's also the only game where they played elite talent. I mean, we can talk about Tennessee's receivers. I think they're average, very average. And that's the second best group that Ohio State's had to go against as a secondary. So you just have to decide. Did Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson expose Ohio State's secondary as not able to contain NFL talent at receiver, or was it just a bad day and they've shut everybody else down and they're going to have a much better day against the Oregon skill? That's the one thing that makes me nervous is maybe they're just not what they're cracked up to be in the secondary, and this Oregon skill is going to cause a ton of headaches and problems for the defense again.
I think it's our best game. I know that there's some other games that are intriguing, but I do think it's the best game of probably the entire playoff, certainly this round. Do you have as a 7 seed, Ohio State a slight favorite? Do you have a prediction or a pick in this one?
I think Ohio State wins the game. I think Oregon's too talented to sit here and say Ohio State's going to win by double digits or anything crazy. As long as they don't turn the ball over, I think they're going to win the game. And they had those 2 critical fumbles against Oregon last time that ultimately cost them the game. They can't let Oregon have extra possessions with the skill they have on offense. It's not going to end well. So as long as Will Howard protects the football and we don't have 2 fumbles, I think Ohio State will win the game. I think it'll be a 3-point win. I think it's going to be a really close game and really kind of the first great playoff game. I mean, we'll see what happens tonight with Penn State Boise. I don't think that's going to be a great game. That'll be like finally a playoff game that was actually two quality of teams.
Yeah, we maybe didn't need 8,000 teams in this thing to figure out that there were 3 or 4 teams that could win it all. So, man, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
And we're on all social media, on YouTube, Menace to Sports, really on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere. Just search it up, Menace to Sports, and we go live every day at noon, Monday through Friday.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. Good luck tomorrow, and Happy New Year.
Appreciate it, bro.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching our video today. If you enjoyed this content, if you loved this content, if you hated it, if you agreed or disagreed with anything, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future videos or interviews. We appreciate, again, BetUS for their support. Go check them out. We will talk to you soon. Have a very happy New Year.